I'm really digging this idea of reading excerpts from these chapters because, a part of me just wants to be done reading this book. Another part of me wants to share certain images, scenes, wacky sentences. It reminds me of something this lady, Elif Batuman, this is a sequel to The Idiot, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer. This is Either Or, based on a Soren Kierkegaard collection of essays and letters, fictional. Anyway, the point is, she criticizes the cliche, "It's good on a sentence level," which is like telling someone, "Oh, I like you in the details, but overall you're a mofo." And that's kind of how I feel about this book. I like it at certain parts on the sentence level, but overall it's just like it's too big of a fruit to throw up on YouTube, just like this. Throw up, literally what I meant. Throw out, put out, whatever. You know what I mean. So, enough. Chapter 9, Part 3 of The Summer Abroad. Of all the cities we would roll through, the one I had absolutely no idea what to expect from was Praha. I had never been to Milano or München before, but at least in those towns I knew what to expect. Praha, on the other hand, nada. Except that the word bohemian came from there, and that Kepler and Kafka, and some other mad geniuses too. But that was about it. Kepler, who'd driven himself to the brink of insanity, failing to turn the a posteriori system of astronomy into a collection of a priori platonic solids, and Kafka, who'd treated his stories with poetic vinegar and sweet and spicy paprika illusions, had lived out his own saltless mashed potato life here surrounded by surreal isolation. I wanted that. I wanted to apply my own solids and strain my own metaphors from cooked experiences. And by the time we hopped off the local train and looked up at a gloomy, overcast sky, gray lights falling down over the backdrop of a ruined city, broken sidewalks, torn up ads fluttering in the wind, and patches of dry weed sprouting between the cracks of a has-been civilization, we knew what was up. This wasn't Western Europe anymore. This was the bullseye smack dab center of 200, 300, 400, no, like 600, 700 years of human understanding. A gate, a bridge, and then an overpass. Few have conquered this place, we figured, and today, that's why, is free. Dark and gloomy Central Europe, and free. Praha was a major stop for backpackers, it seemed. Such a confluence of flowing ideas, all-encompassing. And then there was the point. The X that Rick had dashed on his napkin map. The door of the hostel we'd spend the night at. The gnome. An old wooden door begged us to run away. Then inside, well, not necessarily inside, but through a door, a staircase greeted us welcome. And pairs of snails making sloppy, sticky love paid us no heed. Tangled they were over one another, dangling, of course, while hung up on the walls were trumpeters, I know, blowing their horns for our arrival. Finally, at the lobby, nothing having quite prepared us for this, a liver-spotted gypsy with purple bandanas wrapped around her head tapped her fuchsia nails on a keyboard. "Please mind the gap," she said. Soon as she heard the bell over our heads ring. "The what?" Alex asked, but it was too late. His foot had dipped a little too low into the crack between the floorboards. Lucky for him, the fall hadn't landed him on a flat surface. Instead, his elbow hit an incline, and he sort of rolled about until picking himself up. That's when we noticed there wasn't a single parallel line in the hostel. Everything was a little off-center, a little off-kilter, pretty much helter-skelter. It reminded me a lot of the Forest Temple in that Triforce video game. And to what we played our ocarinas and stepped forth fearlessly, after picking up Alex, of course, towards the gypsy, handing her our debit cards. She showed us a real map of the city as well as the map of the gnome, which played out more like a maze we had to solve than a building with amenities. We figured the best way to tackle the gnome was to split up. So Alex took to laundry, Rick to the lounge for Wi-Fi, while I leaned back on the door of our dorm and chilled, tried not to think too much or pass out. All of a sudden, some metal music thrashed down the hall. Curious, I chased it to the dorms in the very back of the gnome where the private rooms were. Between a blast drum solo and a battle cry, I laid my hand on the knob of the door before me and tried to listen. Then, from under my hand, the knob turned. "Is the music too loud?" The man was tall and tan, a bearded gypsy fellow, jacked and tattooed, and the proud owner of a head to ankle dreadlocks. "Not at all, man." He invited me into his two-bed dorm. Yada 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 yada. I'm starting to lose track here, but basically, Mikhail meets a couple of rock and rollers, and they talk about how awesome Texas is. They all decide to go out on a pub crawl, and they go on a pub crawl, and Mikhail meets an Argentina on the pub crawl. They almost hook up. I'm just here skimming these pages. And then they do hook up. And then they stumble out of the bar. And she says this. She had no idea how to get back to her apartment. We stopped every other block, looking around for something she might recognize. But every time we stopped, we flung ourselves on top of each other. She was a meter high, maybe. But she had a grown woman's face and a grown woman's kiss. The way she pulled at my lower back, the way she let me lasso her hips, the way she turned her head under the gray check sky, between centuries of architecture and medieval parks and the like, teleporting me, making me feel mature like her. She was the kind of woman that looked you in the eyes and made contact with every kiss. This is what I wanted, a meaningful relationship. For a split second I imagined us living together the rest of our lives. Why not? She was Argentine, and we could speak to our children together and teach them Spanish. Maybe she was spiritual too. Then we got down the long alleyway and she stopped pretending. Agostina said, "Bueno, acá vivo yo." Then turned around and tapped a kiss on my lips with her fingers. I looked at her, then up at the sign over the door. It was some stupid hostel with a stupid name. She thanked me for walking her there. "Estoy en un dormi," she said. "No puedo traer a nadie." She smiled up at me, then turned into her hostel and disappeared. Knocked off my feet, the street-side curb served as my bench while other kids ignored my unasked, unanswered questions and enjoyed their unquestioned, unexamined answers. One by one, the groups turned into couples, and the couples walked up into the dorm where I wasn't allowed. Only one group of 3 bleach blonde girls and one bleach blonde boy stayed outside, all tearing away at their donor wraps, and drenched in the pink sauce they came. The boy put down his donor and walked up to me. "You okay, mate?" "I'm just drunk." "Are you staying here?" "I'm at the Gnome." "Shit, that's on the other side of town, mate. You ought to take a taxi." "I don't want to pay for no damn taxi." "Don't be a cunt." He flagged one down, opened the door and kicked me in, shouted cheers, then snapped a photo of me right before slamming the door. That's the end of the chapter. Oh my god, so much chapter. So much chapter. I guess back in the day, I thought one chapter was like a movement. Like a whole movement had to be, we get to Prague, we meet some people, we go out, we get lost, we go on a pub crawl spontaneously, we meet a girl, she walks away, I follow her, I walk her to her dorm, it ends like crap, and then there's this image of watching other people have fun, very Into the Wild, you know? I didn't think I was right Into the Wild, but this is very Into the Wild, you know? The part where, what's the guy's name? Emil Hirsch, the actor? He's just like staring through the window pane of a restaurant, and he imagines he's one of these suited assholes laughing ha 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 hysterically. That's kind of being absorbed here. But dang, all those things? That's one chapter? What the heck? No, man, I feel like now I would have snapped all those into different chapters. It's crazy. I feel like I would cut so much of this book, but then also write so much more of this book. So, I don't know. That's just the way it is. Let's read another couple of chapters, yeah? Peace.